workshop is basically, it can have fancy titles or not so fancy titles, but basically we're going to do some writing stories in verse today. And I didn't think a lot about writing stories in verse, but I realize I do that all the time as a songwriter. And that's why this workshop is good for just writing stories, but you can also convert them to song lyrics. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on. First thing I'd like to do is share some of the objectives in this workshop. And here we go. So this is how you can get in touch with me if you need to. My name is Chris Kastle. That's Chris with a CH and Kastle with a K. If you don't use that spelling, you probably will get all sorts of other people that you may not have intended. So this is my email. Not my email, it's my website, which will give you my email and other information. Okay, so we're going to do writing stories in verse today. And I don't have a lot of slides, but I thought it might be nice just to look at the objectives in writing as well as me talking about them. You're going to garner a new perspective and approach to writing an already existing original, personal, or public domain story. And I hope that most of you got the little blurb yesterday that said to come equipped with an already existing story, because the purpose of this workshop is not to determine your characters, not to determine your plot. You should already have an idea about that. We're going to utilize the discipline of writing in alternating couplets to render a poetic story that may also be useful as a musical ballad. And alternating couplets are a couple of lines that rhyme with each other, such as in a Shakespearean couplet, which is a particular pattern of that. The usefulness of couplets is far-reaching because those couple of lines that rhyme with each other can be used together. They can be used at the beginning and end of a verse. They can be used alternately, which is what we're going to do today. I realize that we will not have enough time to be able to write an entire piece today. Some of you might be able to, but hopefully each of us will be able to take home a new treatment or a first draft of a story that's familiar to you in verse, written under deadline, because we're only going to have 8 minutes to write to start that. And talk about some ways that have helped me to overcome the times that I may have had writer's block. So then I need to look at my schedule here. Again, if you just came in, we won't have time to have each of us introduce each other, but if you want to put information in the chat, you're welcome to do that. So does anybody have any questions about the objectives? Okay, so I'm going to stop my share of screen and talk a little bit more about the elements of a story. They're really easy to remember. And if you go back to probably second grade or first grade even, there are 3 things every story must have: a beginning, a middle, and an end. You don't necessarily have to present them in that order. There's flashbacks, there's all sorts of ways to present them out of order. But if you look at a story in 3 parts, beginning, middle, and end, I find that helpful. For some people, it helps them to know what the ending will be before they even start writing into the rest of it and moving towards that goal. I'm a little bit of a free-form writer in that I have an opening sentence, which is how I usually do things, an opening sentence or phrase, and I let things move from there. But usually by about halfway through the story, I know how it's going to end, and I can go in. go in that direction. So I realize that all of you, I hope, got that little notice to prepare a little outline of a story. I'm not going to ask you to share that outline with anyone here, but it will prove very useful to you for the first exercise that we're going to do. The first exercise that we're going to do, and I'll go back to sharing the screen, I think. Go back here. I don't have the technology of PowerPoint, so what we're going to do, what I'm asking you to do, if you so desire, is to take your story and write a 15-word description, including a beginning and middle and end. I once looked at some information in the Florida folklore collection, and there was a little card in there about a Native American story about a young woman who had been abducted by pirates, and they were burying their treasure on the Manatee River, and the ship caught on fire, and she subsequently perished in the fire. And that's why the river sounds like it does at a certain time of year. So I wrote an entire song, ballad about that, and then later wrote further on that as a complete short story in my book, Icy Fingers, From the Icy Fingers of the Deep. So the exercise today, which you will have 3 minutes to do, is to take your story and write a 15-word description that creates the beginning, middle, and end. As I did here, pirates with a captive sail upriver, that's the beginning. Pirates disembark to bury the treasure, the middle, and the ship burns, captive dies, end. So I'm going to give about 3 minutes to write on this, and I hope you enjoy it. You may start now. Any questions? Okay. Five minutes, not 3. You have 1 minute left. Okay, time is up. Is there anyone who would like to share their synopsis with us? No volunteers. Okay. Carrie, why don't you share with us?
Okay. Um, Traveling to Nashville to get a guitar and see a concert. Memories for a lifetime.
Okay. One of the things that is important, and I will get to you in a second, Bonnie. One of the things that's important here is that when you're writing a synopsis like this, it helps you put things in perspective and put your story in order to think of what's really important as your beginning, middle, and end. So, Bonnie, you're up. You have to unmute yourself. There you
go. Life begins with hopes. Midlife brings questions and crisis. Life ends, hopes unfulfilled. Evolution continues.
Okay. So there's almost a little poem contained in you. You have a story poem right there. So sometimes it's not easy to find those 15 words. And I just sort of chose that randomly because I made myself do the exercise first. What's interesting about this is when you're retelling a story or a story that's been familiar to you, to try to look at what's really important in that story. Sometimes you find that the story you're telling is actually a different story than you intended to tell. So it's kind of a nice way of looking at that. So I thank you for sharing your writing with us. I'm going to talk a little bit about fleshing out that 15-word description now. The other thing that you got to do in this past 5 minutes of writing here is that you have a project to complete under deadline. Some of us are happier with deadlines. Some of us are not so happy with deadlines. I personally happen to be a deadline writer because having the impetus to just wait for some inspiration to come, for me, it doesn't happen that way. On occasion, rare occasions, but usually I have some event in mind that I have to write for, or I have prompts. So I'm very fond of prompts. That particular piece that I showed, which I'm going to put on the screen again, and then I'm going to share the screen again. Okay, there we go. So I've got the 15-word synopsis there. And I'm hoping that you might take the suggestion, even if you don't usually write in couplets. I find it a really excellent disciplinary tool, and it helps me under that deadline, because once I write that first line, then my mind is able to focus on getting to the end of the second line with a rhyming word, an actual rhyming word. That is not as easy for some people. For me, it helps me. So what we're going to try to do here is when we have our writing exercise, and you'll have 8 minutes to work through that. But I'm going to talk about how to take this simple plot I have here with the 15 word synopsis and take that to something that's an entire piece of writing. So I'm going to move on in this. So this is the first line of the song. We go back to here, we have pirates with captive sail upriver. Now I will say that I have one set of alternating lines that do not rhyme, and it's in the first verse of the song. It happens sometimes. But this is how it came out. With a ransom of riches they stole through the night, those pirates, a bloodthirsty crew, holding coffers of coin and a prisoner below, a damsel both pure and true. They sailed up the inlet and anchored the ship, their captive held fast by her chains. She was sealed there inside by the fire's deadly grip, but the story still remains. So that is fleshing out what I did here with pirates with a captive sail upriver, because without all of the description, it wouldn't be particularly interesting. I guess I could take the elements of those 15 words and attempt in some way to try for a sunroof, but mostly I'm interested in going from that very short outline to this. So that's, I've got my first thing, story still remains. The second part of this was, pirates disembarked to bury the treasure. You'll also notice that, again, alternating couplets, which for the most part actually rhyme. This is a chorus that I have in there. If I wanted to take this particular thing here, I could take parts of it and easily make a Shakespearean sonnet out of it. So I have a little chorus in there with a 2-line thing. So second part was, pirates disembarked to bury the treasure. She was left on board so no tongue could tell where they would dig in the night. On a fine silver flute she played so well in the flickering candlelight. She played on her flute as the ship sank low, such a mournful and desperate sound, a tale of greed and a tale of woe, and a treasure that's never been found. Classic pirate stuff. So again, tell really rhymes with well. Night really rhymes with light. Low really rhymes with woe. Sound really rhymes with found. It's okay occasionally to depart from that. I personally, for my writing, it flows well for me. As I say, if I have that determining first line, it puts me in focus to write that second rhyming line, which I can use in any way I want. It's fun to create new patterns of poetry, and I've done that on occasion. But if I were telling a classic story as a classic ballad, which doesn't necessarily have to have music, there is usually some type of form to it, which does two things. It helps me to write, but it also helps people to remember what you're writing. Rhymes help people remember. I think anybody here can attest to the fact that you've written a wonderful free verse poem, but it's really hard to memorize it, and it's really hard to present it because it does not have that form. So I'm saying it's a way to help that as well. So let's go to, so we have beginning, middle, and the ship burns and the captive dies. So how can we say that more poetically? At the mouth of the river, at the dark of the moon, each year in the month of May, The Manatee River sings out a tune as it rolls into the bay. It's a strange crooning sound that began long ago with the song of a dying maid. On the wind and the water, you can hear it still as twilight starts to fade. So it tells the whole story, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I do something a little bit differently here with my, you can see here, my short little 2-line couplet here. I have something that ties it all together at the end instead of, and the time goes as it ebbs and flows, where is she? And the time goes as the river flows to the sea, and the time goes, where is she? But on the last one, it ebbs and flows endlessly. So this story goes on forever. So does anyone have any questions or observations they would like to make at this time? Any thoughts? Bonnie, if you're speaking, I can't, you're okay. I can't see everyone. So what we're going to do is have some time here, and it looks like we'll have a little more time than originally I thought we would have, to try writing something of our own based on whatever your 3 lines, your 15-word synopsis was. If you feel at this time that you didn't like your 15-word synopsis and you would prefer to have a different one or write a different story in beginning, middle, and end, that would be great. I just wanted to go down one thing further a little bit here and talk briefly before you actually start writing. When you're writing a story, and in addition to being a poet and musician, I'm also a storyteller. And one of the tricks of being a storyteller is that you want to be in the story. You want to picture yourself in that story. Even if it's gruesome, it will allow you to understand the feelings and what's actually happening there. So look at yourself in the story. Is what's happening to you realistic within the story you want to tell? Relax and have fun with the words. Don't try for instant perfection, but in the end, use a well-crafted effort, because you need to have that. The good news is that if you start ahead of time, even if you have a deadline, if you start within a reasonable period of time, you'll have a chance for many rewrites as you need. And once you write something, doesn't mean that you can't go back later and change it in some way. In this very piece that I just did to you, which I'm going to actually play one verse of so you can hear the melody that goes with it, I originally had a different verse. I switched the order of the verses. And that was at the suggestion of a friend who said, you know, you really need to put what you've been using as your first verse at the end. And they were absolutely right, because it makes a difference in how you view the end of the story. And I'm doing this for the people out there who might think about either doing songwriting or writing the verses, because sometimes people collaborate and someone else can write the music for it. With a ransom of riches they stole through the night, those pirates of bloodthirsty crew, holding coffers of coin and a prisoner below, a damsel both pure and true. They sailed up the inlet and anchored the ship, their captive held fast by her chains. She was sealed there inside by the fire's deadly grip, but the story still remains. and the wind blows and the river flows to the sea, and the time goes as it ebbs and flows. Where is she? So just to show you a little bit of that with a melody to it, and if you are writing,
That was cool. I just want to let you, my husband started nodding along. So
thanks
very cool.
Thank you. It's available on CD and it's also in the book. But anyway, the point I wanted to make is that if you are thinking about being a songwriter, it's easy if you have rhymes, and so that's how you would add a melody. Also, quick little answer to something no one's asked, but it's a really common question. Which do I write first? The words or the music? I always write the words first, because I think before anything else, I'm a poet. So I write the words first, and the melody just appears with it because that's what it's supposed to be. So I'm going to go back to those hints, and then we're going to go to writing. You can start anywhere in the story. Keep words and phrases that come to you. You might use them another time in another place in that story or others. It's always good to keep track of what you're writing. One thing I started to do when I started getting more involved in poetry, I don't think I did it when I was doing strictly songwriting, but I honestly, because I've written a certain volume of stuff now, it's important to, if people are reading your things, you want to say things differently each time, even if you're dealing with the same topic. So I find myself wanting to go beyond words that I would normally choose. And so it's okay to use a rhyming reference if you get stuck, because sometimes it may spur you on. It's a little word prompt all its own to spur you on. Again, revise as many times as you need, but don't, there's a point when you have to stop. There's a point when you have to realize that it's okay, and share it with a close friend or someone else you trust, and see if your message is coming across. Ask them, what did that story tell you? Was there something in there that stopped you? Was there a word that you didn't like that really threw you out of the flow of what was going on? So now it is your turn to write. I'm going to stop the screen sharing here. And we have 8 minutes about 8 or 9 minutes to begin a story. Again, you might only get to the beginning today, but keep in mind, if you can write that in verse, try using either couplets together or alternating couplets. They're also very movable, so you can move them around to other places within your work. So we're going to start now. You have 2 minutes left. Unfortunately, time is up. You'll have plenty of time to work on this after the workshop, but I would like to invite two people, if they feel comfortable doing that, sharing as far as they got. Sharon, unmute yourself, Sharon.
I got it here. This is going to be funny. It really will. Called conversation. A pregnant woman says, "We have to name this coming Tad. What I've thought up is pretty sad. I'd like some help, perhaps confer. There's my mom. I might ask her, but she'll ask my mother-in-law and Jody, my old pain in the craw. And pretty soon we'll have a mob trying to do a simple job. Now it's all gotten out of hand. And yonder comes a chatty band, each one bearing her own name, ready for the combat game. And then the middle part will take up." That's going to be funny.
Okay. Well, it's a really cool observation, and the rhymes are excellent. Thank you very much. Who else? Oh, you got two hands up there. Carrie.
Yeah, I think Parv's hand was up first, so if they'd like to read, that's fine.
Aunt has 7 sons. She wants a girl, so she snatches a niece from play school, hides her in a cellar, feeding her air. Uncle finds her, sets her free. The girl misses her aunt in the dark glasses and paisley hats. Prays to God to give her a girl, but instead she marries one of the sons, who wears shirts like her uncle, who was an army officer in Bangalore and sailed in balloons, eating fish, weed, and octopuses. Meet an aunt at a fish market, the only child of a sea merchant. Together they set sail, catching and swimming for fish. Sorry, we can't hear you, Chris. You need to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm trying to cut out some static that happens in my line every once in a while.
Okay.
Again, thank you, Parv, for doing that. Now, Carrie, would you care to share yours?
Sure. Mine is about my grandpa, actually. It's called Mementos. I've kept my mementos of my grandpa. His gold union card sits on my shelf. A photo of us hand in hand on holiday. I will always remember the joy I felt. And then I don't know if we're dealing with choruses right now, but The chorus would be, worth nothing to anyone, they mean everything to me. I can feel his spirit near, guiding me to be free. Verse 2 is, I carried his red coin purse to the church with high stools. We each had a drink with cherries, laughing like happy fools.
An excellent start. Excellent start. And it's going to make a really great song. So maybe sometime when you finish it, you can send me a copy of it just so I can hear. It'd be thrilling to know.
Sure.
So, and someone said that they missed my contact information at the beginning. It's just chriskastle.com, but you have to remember Chris is with a CH and Kastle is with a K. So I really thank you for participating in the workshop. And now we have a little time, just a few minutes for some discussion, how this helped you or something you would, a comment or whatever. So it's now open and I will recognize you. Please put your hand up if you have something to say. No one. Not at all. Wow.
Well, my husband just wanted to say something about the song that you sang.
Oh, okay.
I was listening to it in the other room, and it sounded like a sea shanty. And then I heard Wendy say something about my husband probably like that. And then I came in and said, yes, I'd like to hear it again.
Well, thank you very much. It's you can find it. I mean, I have CDs and such. So if you go to my website, I also have. I think if you look for it on YouTube, you can probably hear it with. And I shouldn't say this, but you hear it without having to pay for it. I think I get some royalty like 0.0001 cent for it or something like that when it streams.
Anyway,
Thank you very
What
much.
was the title of it?
The title is the Song of the Dying Maid.
Okay.
the what?
The Song of the Dying Maid. So you can hear it again later.
So you can hear it
Okay.
later.
Write
Awesome.
it down before you forget it.
I will.
Thank you very
Okay.
much. I have this large background in scene music and things. Any other comments?
Awesome.
I was just going to ask a question, and when you had your verses up there, each one was 8 lines. But
Mhm.
I'm assuming if we only wanted to write 4, we could. Is that correct? I mean, it doesn't have to be a full 8 every single time.
No, it's whatever pattern you choose to do. Couplets are usually better in sets of 4, or
Right.
8, multiples of 2, for obvious reasons. The other thing that's the form that I used happens to be the one that I used for that particular poem/song. I have some songs that are written to a pattern of 4 lines and then there's a chorus. I have at least one song that is written with a 5-line verse. It's a song that I co-authored called Song for the Whales, one of my big hits. But anyway, you can choose your pattern. You can also choose whether you want to write strictly rhyming couplets or alternating rhyming, or whatever rhyme scheme that makes the poem, the piece flow. And you're going to find sometimes, even though it might be a word that means what you want it to mean, there's something about it. I suggest to everyone that you read your poem out loud. Certainly, if you're planning on making it a piece of music, you will have that opportunity. But if not, read it out loud according to whatever, or if no punctuation that you used, because that's a true test of how it flows. And regardless of whether you're writing free verse or you do choose to write rhyming things, or if you're looking for a cutting word, if you're writing a haiku, you need to have that flow and that power where it needs to be. And sometimes, you need to change a word here and there. But no, you don't have to use 8 lines just because I used that. Yes, MJ. Take there.
Okay. I got you. So you had requested that we come with a piece. I technically didn't come with a piece, but I looked through my stuff and I had something. But then I felt like I didn't understand the assignment because I'm like, well, what would I do with it? So what I ended up doing was just writing something small to kind of complement what I already wrote. I had wrote a small paragraph, I guess, or whatever, about meeting my doppelganger
Okay,
on the train.
go ahead and read it really quickly, and then that'll be the last thing we'll have read, because, you know, I realize you were supposed to have, I think somebody sent out sent out that part of the assignment only yesterday, because it wasn't, for some reason, it wasn't in the initial description. So
Right.
go ahead and please do read your piece, MJ.
Okay, so I should read what I wrote today, or what I already had.
What you wrote today, yes, please.
Okay, so unexpected happenings on a train ride in Brooklyn. Meeting your doppelganger. What if we had nothing in common, other than resemblance, that is? Who's to say she's from here, or even speaks English for that matter? Does she even recognize our resemblance? Is this wishful thinking on my end? I want to be friends with her. I want to trade stories with her. I want to know what her life is like. Would I be disappointed? Would that be bad? What is this about my humanness that prompts this desire?
Okay.
And that's as far as I got.
That's great, because what you've done is that you've written something that is taken from something else. You've synthesized it to something else, which is part of what this exercise was. So even though you didn't have the assignment, you did a really good job of working with it. So thank you. I'm glad you got a chance to share.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I think that we're just about at our, I have to ask you, are we at our spot where Brooks, how are we on our time?
Yeah, I mean, you can go another 5 minutes. You've got 10 minutes left, and my closing is very short. So if people still want to share, or you have more to talk
Great.
about.
Does anyone else want to share? Be brave. We're all friends here. Okay. I'm just, okay. So no questions. No one wants to share.
Yeah, if there's no questions and everyone's done sharing, we can wrap up a few minutes early too. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will, you know what I'll do, since we have that time, since we had a request from Wendy's husband, just to end this out, I'll play the whole song if you would like to hear that, and I'll put the words up here.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
Yay.
you can see them as well. Let me do my screen share. I'm over here. I gotta come back that way. Gotta slide this into the right place. Okay, there we go. Let me go down to the words. Now, I'm not going to be able to go through these lyrics. You're going to see what's on this first verse, and that's all, because I can't play and be moving the screen at the same time. So, or I'll try. I'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. With a ransom of riches they stole through the night, those pirates of bloodthirsty crew, holding coffers of coin and a prisoner below, a damsel both pure and true. They sailed up the inlet and anchored the ship, their captive held fast by her chains. She was still there inside by the fire's deadly grip, but the story still remains. And the wind blows and the river flows to the sea, and the time goes as it ebbs and flows. Where is she? She was left on board, so no tongue could tell where they would dig in the night. On a fine silver flute she played so well in the flickering candlelight. She played on her flute as the ship sank low, such a mournful and desperate sound. A tale of greed and a tale of woe, and a treasure that's never been found. And the wind blows and the river flows to the sea, and the time goes as she ebbs and flows, and let's see. At the mouth of the river, at the dark of the moon, each year in the month of May, it's strange shooting stars and flows of the go, the song of a dying day. On the wind and the water you can hear it still, as twilight starts to fade. And the wind blows and the river flows to the sea, and the time goes as it ebbs and flows endlessly.
Yeah, I was right. It was a sea shanty. I always liked, one of my favorite ones was the Cardiff Rose. I
Uh-huh.
don't know if you're familiar with it.
That was beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
thank you for playing it again.
You're welcome. You can hear quite a few sea nautically based, maritime based stuff if you look into my stuff.
Very cool.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming. Thank you all for participating, and I hope that you will be able to continue the pieces that you started here. And Carrie, I really do mean it when I say when you finish the song, I'd love to hear it. And again, thanks. Give yourselves all a real hand for participating and joining in. Many other things
you
still
so much.
happening with Jack's Poetry Fest. So